And now let me introduce you to our panel of questioners. First is Greg Vezina, the organizer and sponsor of this program. And next to him is Dora Fong, a radio and television student from Ryerson Polytechnic University. And John Deverell, a journalist and president of the Southern Ontario Newspaper Guild on leave from the Toronto Star. All the questions are directed to all the parties. The speaking order has been determined by lot and will rotate with each question. Each leader will be allowed to speak for 1 minute on each question. So, Dr. Russo, you'll be starting out the rotation. I'll ask Dora Fong to ask the first question.
In this election, like any Canadian election where there are more than two parties, a majority of voters will lose their votes. All the supporters of all the parties here are very likely to lose their votes tonight. And at the same time, some other parties and their voters will be heavily overrepresented in Parliament. Is this misrepresentation of the vote a serious problem for democracy? And if so, what would you do about it?
It's a very serious problem for democracy. I'm running against David Anderson, and last time he said he urged Green Party members to vote for him to prevent the reform from getting in. Citizens have got to vote for what they want, not to be caught up in strategic voting. The Green Party of Canada is working with two law professors from the University of Toronto on a charter challenge against the first-past-the-post system. What we're arguing is the first-past-the-post system discriminates against minorities, women, First Nations, and small parties. And I think that this is the time where we have to really focus on the fact that there are fundamental flaws with our system. And nothing has shown it more than what has been happening in the States. And I think we've got to make sure that this election, as was said earlier, is an election where people vote for what they want, not to prevent the one they want less, or not to prevent the one they want least from getting in. And I think that the Green Party throughout the world has been promoting some form of mixed proportional representation, and we have managed to elect people and actually form governments in different countries. And the time has come in Canada for fundamental change in the electoral system, not only with proportional representation, but there should be no corporate funding, no union funding. Individuals vote, and only individuals should be able to contribute to political parties.
Thank you very much, Dr. Russo. Mr. Hellyer, you're up next.
Yes, I think proportional representation would make a tremendous difference, but people have talked about it for a long while and we haven't got it yet. Certainly our party is committed to it, as are most of the parties here tonight. In the meantime, and what that would produce, of course, is a minority government in the present situation, which is really the only hope for Canada at this moment. If Mr. Chrétien gets majority, which the newspapers tell us he's going to, then it will be bye-bye Canada, and we will be destined to become the 51st American state. So I think people should vote for other parties and not let them get away with this idea that there should be a polarization between the Alliance and the Liberals, and they should vote for Canadian Action Party candidates in the 70 ridings where we're running, and for the party of their choice in other ridings, perhaps for the NDP or the Tory Party or the Green Party or whoever they choose, and put enough people in the House of Commons who are not of those two major parties to act as a brake and to stop the sellout of Canada and to turn the situation around for our country before it's too late.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hellyer. And next, Mr. St. Maurice.
Our party believes in proportional representation as well. It is the, I guess for lack of a better term, the holy grail of all those small parties. The only difference, I believe, with the Marijuana Party is our capacity to actually implement that should we form a majority government, for the simple reason that we do not aspire to hold power. We've seen in the past, particularly in Quebec, the Parti Québécois 25 years ago got a lot of power promoting proportional representation. Once they attained a position where they have that power, the governments become reluctant to giving it up. Any party here which gets the power with the current system would be perhaps foolhardy to change the system because it would bring about their own demise. Our lack of aspiration to actually holding the reins of power for any longer than to change the marijuana law makes us the most credible party on the scene that can actually legitimately promote proportional representation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. St. Maurice. And now, Ms. Smith.
Well, I think the question that you have raised is, of course, very important because We've seen one government after another elected with a smaller and smaller majority, with smaller turnout, number of people actually bringing in these governments. But nonetheless, they say that they have a mandate to govern. And so this has less and less credibility. The Canadian electoral law actually doesn't in any way mean to empower Canadians. What its underlying principle is to allow the expression of a clear and coherent political will, as it's called, in the form of party government. And so as a result, the two-party system, which in Canada has been completely destroyed with the loss in the '93 election of the Conservative Party. And so they're trying to reestablish that and having a lot of trouble because they don't really, none of the parties that are in government, either in power or in the opposition, represent all of the country.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. Ashley Deans is next.
The Natural Law Party would satisfy all Canadians by creating an all-party government. This would be a government where the cabinet was composed of experts in each field from all political parties, so that decisions were made based on expertise, not just political expediency. The way in which to ensure that an all-party government is harmonious is to understand that we get the government that we deserve. If the collective consciousness of Canada is tense and disharmonious, then that will be reflected in the government. And that is what we see today, that our democracy is being divided on regional lines and on party lines. By creating coherence in the collective consciousness of the nation, and here the Natural Law Party has the technology to do this through the Transcendental Meditation and TM City programs, including yogic flying, these scientifically proven programs create such an influence of coherence in collective consciousness that then harmony prevails at the governmental level, and an all-party government can then represent all of the people and not just a partial value of the people.
Thank you, Mr. Deans. And Mr. Figueroa.
Well, thank you. In fact, the Communist Party was the first party in this country to call for a form of proportional representation, and it's encouraging and enlightening that now this demand has really taken off across the country. And I think Canadians in general are frustrated with the present electoral system. They feel alienated and quite cynical about it, precisely because they're being herded into voting for one of two options, neither of which is palatable to most working people. In fact, as other speakers have said, the problem is that the ruling parties, the established parties, cannot be relied upon to open this question up to genuine public discussion and reform. And that's why our party calls for a fundamental reappraisal of the whole electoral system and in fact the Constitution itself, and calls for a democratically elected Constituent Assembly to look at these questions and many other questions relating to federal-provincial relations and so on. One other point I'll raise very briefly is the fact that the large parties have been taking other measures to curb the participation of smaller parties. Our party was involved for the last 7 years in a big election, rather a big court battle to overcome those, and we have achieved many successes there.
Thank you, Mr. Figueroa.